Hi everyone, and welcome to Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review. I'm Stephanie, and I've been collecting and selling vintage fashion magazines for over 20 years.
And I'm Morley. I'm a former copywriter and am now an award-winning playwright and screenwriter.
Together, we will examine some of your favorite vintage fashion magazines from the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
On Uncovered, we'll discuss some of the magazine's models, layouts, and did I mention the models?
And we'll also review some of the ads and articles that make these magazines such a great piece of pop culture history. So, fasten your seatbelts and let's get uncovered. Hi everyone, and welcome to Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review Podcast. Today we have a very special guest.
Do we ever? You know, Steph, when you look at the Mona Lisa by Da Vinci, you admire her for her mysterious smile. When you admire the sculpture of David by Michelangelo, you admire it for how closely it resembles the human form. However, what you may not appreciate is how the artist created the masterpiece. So, for example, how many of us know that the inspiration for American Gothic by Grant Wood was inspired by his dentist and his sister, or that many pieces of art that we know today were actually the fourth or fifth attempt at a painting using the same piece of canvas?
The same can be said about magazine models. Many think that they show up at the shoot just appearing the way they do in the magazines. However, our guest today is considered by many to be the Cézanne of the scissors, the Casson of the curling iron, and the Botticelli of the blow dryer. Ladies and gentlemen, Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review Podcast is honored to have as our guest today, Mr. Gad Cohen. Gad, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
It's a pleasure being here and speaking with both of you.
We're excited to have you here. So how does a nice Jewish boy from Montreal end up in New York as one of the fashion industry's leading hairstylists?
Just by chance. And I guess it's also preparation for the opportunity. And it led from me working in Montreal as a hairstylist in a salon that was in Montreal called La Coupe. And they had another one on Madison Avenue. And I started to commute back and forth from 1 week in Montreal, 1 week in New York. And one thing led to the other. And in this salon happened to be all the beauty editors and models that were there. And I just started doing their hair. And then before you know it, I started to do photo shoots. And one of the biggest photo shoots when I first arrived was doing the 8 top models for Cosmopolitan. You know, it was a beauty story. So It was about hair and makeup. And there was girls like Gia and Bitten and Juli Foster. And the list goes on of all these. Did I drop a couple names or something?
Amazing.
Well, actually, you know, Gad,
only the biggest in the industry.
What I'm particularly interested in is, what do you prefer, Montreal bagels or New York bagels?
Montreal bagels. I do. I used to always go to Montreal and bring them back. I don't know. I guess I was accustomed to them.
Great.
That's cool. So when you started out and were doing hair for celebrities, did you ever say to yourself, I can't believe I'm cutting so-and-so's hair?
Yes, of course. I think it happens to all of us. But then eventually, as you're working on them, you respond to their humanity, and it's all about them. It's really not about you. It's about making them feel good. And the reason why I love what I do is always making people feel better than they were when they sat down on the chair, and get up with confidence. So you really want to check in with them and have the empathy factor and seeing how they feel and what their needs. And then, you know, your inspiration comes from understanding how they want to see themselves.
Yes.
Wow, that's really beautiful.
And that's universal.
Yes, absolutely.
A haircut the other day, he said, I feel like a new person because we've been locked down and
Now, of
It
course,
makes you feel like a new person.
the difference is that they charged me to find it as opposed to cut it. So that's okay.
Yeah, haircut. I mean, our hair is our antennae. So, when it's like a barometer of, that's why we say good hair day and bad hair day.
Sure.
It kind of gives us a temperature of how we feel about ourselves internally.
Sure. Yes. And it does change your day if you wake up and your hair is good.
Absolutely.
Yes. Is there anyone whose hair you'd like to do but haven't yet?
There's a lot of people that I'd like to, that have it. Who would I have liked to? I always wanted to do Madonna, which I've never had the chance to do. And, so that was like one hair icon that I always would have liked to do her hair, but I never had that chance. But she's had great looks, and she's such an iconic figure, and she's changed a lot. So, but I've had a chance to work on a lot of other interesting and beautiful women and men. So
for sure,
I guess the thing is too is that when you're working on someone's hair, in some ways, I guess if they give you carte blanche, it's like a canvas, and you can do whatever you want, and you really become this amazing artist, who can take little pieces here, little pieces there, and create something they weren't expecting, right?
Yeah, I mean, the hair is really, they always when you're working with photographers, it's really a very important aspect. It depends what you're doing, if it's fashion, if it's beauty, if it's a cover. I mean, everything, depends on the collaboration of the team that you're working with on a photo shoot. And it's about the girl as well. And it's really bringing out the person's spirit and beauty. So you're just part of this extraordinary collaboration of, great photographers that have great visions and beautiful models. And you just have to, work together and create. So it's not a one person show. It's a huge collaboration.
And you've worked with some of the best photographers.
Yeah, I've been very lucky to work with the best, and learned a lot just by being in the presence of greatness.
How nice. At what point in your career did you feel that you had finally made it? Was there a big...
Never. Never. I never feel like I've made it. I still don't. You know what I mean? It's just it's my nature to always feel like, oh, I have to do this and I have to. You never feel like. I mean, at least I don't. Never felt like I made it. I've been very blessed to be, in great company, but I've never felt like I've made it, so to say. I always feel it's always good to have that, for lack of better words, ambition, or, just climbing or bettering yourself and making yourself relevant and current and always learning and, striving to make yourself better than you are. And it helps being around the right people.
A lot of people talk about, their reach exceeding their grasp. So, you're as great as you are, you're always, striving for more greatness, or maybe the unattainable, if you will.
Yes, it's not, getting to the top of the mountain. It's the journey,
right.
Going from the bottom and climbing to the top of the mountain. That's my analogy. The journey and the process and the present is really the gift. It's not the, once you get the cover, you get the story, and, whatever it is, the get is not always as satisfying as the journey to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes 100% sense.
For sure. Gad, does your expertise come naturally, or is it something that you learned, or both?
My skills come from something I inherited, because I come from a family of 9 and I'm the youngest. Oh. And my father was a barber, and I have 6 sisters, whom 4 of them are hairdressers, and 2 brothers, and one of them is a hairdresser, and I'm the youngest of 9. So I grew up in this family that did a lot of hair and makeup and fashion, and I was, observing, and just by osmosis, I started doing hair also very, very young, by the age of like 8, 9, 10, and my nieces and nephews, my girlfriends and boyfriends, that were like in the neighborhood, I would bring them into my house and I'd cut their hair, and that's how my skill I honed my skill that way. Just by being around it, I just the skill just morphed into. But I've never went to beauty school, per se, but I did teach, afterwards. I went for maybe about 3 weeks to London to Vidal Sassoon in the late 70s.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sure you were probably the recipient of many hairstyles and haircuts from your brothers and sisters?
If I was the recipient?
Yes. If it's sort of like the guinea pig, if you will.
Well, they were the guinea pigs.
The other way, right?
Yeah. I think I'm the one who actually, took all my sisters, even my mother at the age of 13. I ended up, cutting her hair because I was nagging her. And, she had a big selection. And then, one day she was just like, okay, go ahead. And then she was thrilled, And in those days, they used to set hair. So I got her off the rollers, cut her hair and blew it out. And then she got a lot of compliments from that day on, and you see how you make people feel and you make women feel. And you see that, the fact that they feel so good, and that helps you want to do more and want to, make people feel better about themselves. It's such a blessing to be able to do that. And most of the people that are in the industry who have this kind of little bit of a background, like a little like mine, a little different, but we all kind of have that common thread.
Yeah.
I think the same thing could probably be said with photographers, because ultimately, the fashion photographers, in addition to what they're doing, want to make the models feel good about themselves. And they want to present them in a way where they feel great, just like what you do.
Absolutely. It's a fashion photographer is very much like a movie director. It's very cinematic, and it's also capturing them and making them feel good in their skin, so then they can project for the camera. And I think it starts in the hair and makeup room, and how we, like Cindy Crawford coined the phrase, I don't look like Cindy Crawford when I come in the morning, So that was like, she would always say that in a lot of interviews, which was interesting.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that quote, and it's so. You've just mentioned one, but my next question was actually, who were some of your mentors?
In terms of hair?
Yes.
I think men like Vidal Sassoon was a huge mentor for me. Jean-Louis David was extraordinary. And the magazines I love the magazines from the 60s, like people like Ara Gallant. And then I would look also at people like Garren, I always admired, and Suga and John Sahag. And, these were like people that when I was younger, I would read the magazine. And that's why I wanted to go to New York to, be like them. If I could, but be myself, but like them.
Yes.
But they inspired me. Their work inspired me. I would read magazines like, how the credits are from the side.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do all the time.
You want to see who's the photographer, who did the hair and makeup, whatever the magazine was.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why we started Uncovered, because everyone knows the models, or most people know the models, but we wanted to make sure that the people who really helped make the models who they are get more recognition, like yourself, like the Sandy Linters, and like the Harry Kings and the Garrens. And
that's right.
And if you don't have the magazines, maybe you don't know.
That's right.
And I have them. So
that's right. You're absolutely right. And I love the way you also, when you do your show, and how you always talk about the people behind the scenes, and the models and what they're wearing, and the editors, and the, like you said, the Sandy Linters and Harry King and Garren, who's iconic. I mean, all these people are extraordinary.
And yourself. You're vital.
Yeah, we want to give voice to those maybe who no longer have one because the magazines are vintage, or just in general, people want to know who went into making these magazines so amazing.
So if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Have more patience. Because I think when you're young, you always want to have, what's the next thing and what's the next thing, and it's all about just waiting and just being more grounded. That's what I would give myself as just patience. I think when we're young, we don't have as much patience. We just want things to happen. We don't think things happen quick enough, and it's ironic because as we get older, we have so much more patience and we have less time. It's a kind of I have so much more patience today so that's what I would tell my younger self.
There's this really well-known public speaker who's very famous, passed away, Zig Ziglar, and he would say that people always want to get to the top, but there's no elevator. You have to take the stairs.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. And it's all about the journey. It's really all about the journey, and it's all about preparation for the opportunity, because I really believe that's what luck is. It's really being prepared. So when you are in the right place and the doors, what people say, the old cliche, you have to have a door to open. It's, the doors may open, but it's about staying in the room that really counts. Being able to be, to be reinvited and to redo whatever it is. It's not just the one chance.
I've heard that the definition of luck is when opportunity meets preparedness.
That's so true.
And I think
correct.
So true.
That's what I was trying to say, but you said it better than I did.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you need to be ready.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So Gad, can you tell us why you're a fan of layered hair as opposed to hair that is all one length? I'm
really not a fan of layered. I'm a fan of both.
Sorry, I might have misinterpreted that. Sorry.
I'm a fan of both. I mean, I'm a fan of whatever looks best for whoever I'm doing it on. I like bespoke hair. I like hair that is customized, that it looks like, if I'm doing somebody's hair, I don't want somebody to say, wow, you have a nice hair color or a haircut. I want people to say, oh, you have beautiful hair. That's my biggest compliment, because I want people to look at your hair. It shouldn't compete with who you are. It should be cohesive with who you are. It should make your hair look healthy. Whatever it is, you want to see the person. It's like it's the same analogy of clothing. You don't want the clothes to wear the person. I don't want the hair to overpower, the person that I'm working on. I just want it to be cohesive with it should be just flow with whoever it is that I'm working on.
Again, almost like an extension of who they are.
Exactly.
So you look at the whole person and then you determine what would look best on them.
What would look best. You don't only look at their face. You got to look at the whole body and the silhouette of the person. You have to look at their shoulders, their height, their proportions, and you want the hair to be a beautiful frame and beautiful silhouette that's all cohesive, that looks like it belongs there.
Well, I mean, if you are not the epitome of an artist, I don't know who is. I mean,
I feel like that's a skill that you just have innately that it's really hard to teach. Like,
yeah, you can't teach that. Like,
it's about, with anybody I'm sure that you speak to, I'm sure they'll tell you it's really about listening, and also listening to the person to who you that you're working with, and really having that empathy factor, and also putting yourself in their skin, because when you have that ability of feeling, because we all have insecurities, and I think the more insecure you are about your physicality, you could empathize and understand that the people who are, especially if they're going to be in front of a camera, which is no matter what beautiful model you speak to or celebrity. We all, everybody has a little bit of stage fright, or so you really want to bring their, you want their lights to shine, the best. So you have to try to like make them look the best possible version of themselves.
And what is the biggest hair mistake that you see women make?
I think the biggest mistake is also, I always feel, because there's old cliches. They say, when you get older, you have to cut your hair short, or it's just, there are no rules, and there are no rules because we're also individual and everything has to be individualized. We're also different, and we all have different features, different proportions, different size. And the mistake is that you have to do what is right for you. And also learn how to grow old gracefully. And that means using all your best assets. So if you have great hair, there's no need to cut it all off. You know what I mean? You can shape it, or just like, because hair helps a lot to cover a lot of things that you may not be very happy with. So a lot of women, I find, sometimes as they get older, they make their hair very short, or too short, and that can kind of like expose them. So that's one hair mistake. I always feel like, softer, a little longer, forgiving hair, kind hair, as we age, I think will look good. Or also another mistake is when you look at yourself when you were younger and you want to freeze frame, and you're stuck to a certain look, and you don't evolve with your hair and your hair color, and you have to evolve because you keep changing and you keep morphing. So your hair and makeup needs to gradually, change, but gracefully.
Yes. Yeah.
So since you are a rule breaker, my question is, do you wear white after Labor Day?
Always.
Okay.
I wear white, black, anything. I don't think the seasons dictate for the color. I think it's the fabrics that speak to what you should wear, because you could wear winter white with cashmere,
Yeah.
Okay.
But
good.
back in the day, you would never, but.
Yeah.
You see many hair trends come and go. What are some of your favorite, least favorite?
Hair trends come and go. My favorites. Should I start with the favorites? I like everything classic. I think classic never goes out. I think classic it has a lot of versatility. And back to what I'm going to sound like I'm repeating myself. It's, if something looks good and it gives you style, it's going to be timeless. Mm. It's, something that even if you look at art and old Egyptian hieroglyphics, you'll see the bob, or, so, you look at art and, from like historical. So it's always very geometric and it was linear, but yet, it went on and it evolved to like a Louise Brooks hair, so those are like my favorites, those classic kind of styles that are classic and that are timeless. And least favorites are things that are too trendy, the things that sometimes work editorially, but don't work in real life.
Right. Going back to what you said earlier, I actually love what you said about the classic look, because if you look at Julius Caesar, that was taken to a more modern hairstyle by the Beatles.
Absolutely.
And it was originally cut in France. That's what they were wearing in France in the early 60s. And that's how the Beatles got their due.
You're right. And all that is very inspirational from even their clothes, that Carnaby Street, and the Beatles and the women from the 60s, that era, the Marianne Faithfull and Mick Jagger and that whole, that was a great renaissance of freedom coming out of the 50s, where everything was much more, set and stiff, and everything loosened up and became soft and pretty.
Yes.
Love it.
Can you tell our listeners what exactly the Gad effect is?
Well, an editor at Mademoiselle, then moved to, she's the one who coined the phrase. Her name is Mary McLean, who was one of the beauty editors. And then, she wrote it up in an article, and then I kind of used it. And she said, because every time she got her hair done, everybody would stop her and ask her, who did your hair, or where did you go, or so she would say, I got the Gad effect. So I didn't really coin it. Mary McLean, who worked at Mademoiselle and Glamour with Felicia Milevich, they kind of coined that phrase.
I love it. You should.
So then I took it.
Your resume is beyond impressive. You've done countless covers, have styled some of the most famous celebrities, Naomi Campbell, Jane Seymour, Carly Simon, appeared on countless TV shows, and been named one of the top 3 hairstylists in the US by American Vogue. So what's next for you?
What is next for me? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I'm always open, because at that time I didn't know that was going to happen. So I always feel that what's next is really working on it's always a work in progress, working on yourself and making sure that your skill and you're centered and you're honed for the next journey. I'm into my second act or third act, whatever. So, when you make plans, the universe gives you something else. Everything happens I can't really predict. I mean, I don't have that crystal ball. I wish I could.
And there's something that you can't plan, and opportunities come, and just never know. So I would encourage our listeners to check out your website, gadcohen.com, where they can find tons of tips, TV appearances, photos, an awesome blog, and so much more. And there's also a link in your website, Gad, to make an appointment, either at your private atelier in New York City or in the Hamptons. So very convenient for anyone in the New York area.
And how do they reach him, Steph?
They can call 212-366-5751 to make an appointment. Or also you're on Instagram as well.
That's right.
Your Instagram handle is Gad Cohen. You also have Gad for Glam. Am I missing any?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So yeah, reach out, make an appointment. Gad's a legend in the industry.
And that way you can experience for yourself the Gad effect.
The Gad effect.
Exactly.
So Gad, it's truly been an honor and pleasure having you as a guest today on our show. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gad. It really has been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure as well. And it's been a lot of fun following you guys on Instagram, and
thank you.
Loving to hear also your podcast, which is very insightful.
Thank you so much.
Well, we are honored.
Likewise.
Thank you for listening to Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review Podcast.
Uncovered was produced by Morley Schulman, with music by David Renda and logo design by Alan Lipman.
So remember, if you liked Uncovered, be sure to tell 2 friends about it.
And they'll tell 2 friends.
And so on, and so on, and so on.